Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Ukrainian Talk Show on Pod TV. My name is Sasha Star, and today our distinguished guests are Dr. Jonathan Lockwood. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sasha. Glad to be here as always.
Thank you. And Ivan Kucherenko from Kyiv, Ukraine. Welcome to the show, Ivan.
Hello, Sasha. Hello, Jonathan. Glad to be here as well with you.
Okay, so it's 1,000 days of war, and you have a video that we can start the show with.
Yeah, let's start with
just
it.
proceed. Okay.
Самолет.
Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Ви нашу славну Україну!
Невредимые.
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні!
Украина понад усе!
Воюємо далі. Наші дві хатки осталися. Всім до побачення.
Bravo. That's a great video. I really enjoyed it. And when I mentioned in my remarks something that there will be a very different situation as soon as March next year. What's happening now is that Russian army is in attack right now. They have no more reserves. Everything is up front. And regardless how fiercely Ukrainians will fight this attack, Russians by the mid-January, the latest the end of January, they will be dead. They will not be able to continue their attack or even stop where they are or get back. They will be completely paralyzed, and that will create a perfect situation for Ukrainians just started to simply liquidate all of these forces. By March 25, Ukrainian command is preparing a very powerful attack against all Russian positions, and not only ones that are in Ukraine, but also ones that are in Russia. So therefore, all this, the Atakam's permission to get to the Russian territory, it's very funny that it hasn't been confirmed, but what I've heard that it applies only to Kursk region so far. So what Ukrainians did, they prepared their own missiles to attack Bryansk Oblast. So now both Kursk and Bryansk Oblast are being attacked by Ukrainian missiles, and Russian, all they can do is just to figure out which one is what and which one hit Kursk and which one hit Bryansk. Does it really matter? What if they hit half and half? So what you can do about that? So this
No, yeah, from the Ukrainian perspective, it's so many targets. Which one do we hit first?
absolutely. And the Ukrainians, when Zelensky, when Zelensky was in the United States, he presented his plan of victory both to Biden and Trump. And also he made Trump very interesting commercial proposals, which interested Trump a lot. One is that U.S. could use all the Ukrainian resources as rare metals.
They have an abundance of materials that the United States would be very interested in and would want. Yes, that is correct.
Absolutely. Then they said that they would not allow China to commercialize this project. And finally, they made a proposal to Trump that Ukrainian forces can replace all American soldiers in Europe, NATO forces.
That would be an excellent proposal. And if they did that, it's a great proposal. It's a brilliant proposal. And what it would do, it appeals very much to President-elect Trump's agenda of America first, therefore, which implies that American forces should not be committed overseas unless it is urgently in the interest of America to do so. And also it would contribute to what I've been proposing as the U.S. being instead of the world's policeman, being the world's geopolitical balancer in a manner similar to what Great Britain did during the 19th century when it acted as a balance of power force against any power or combination of powers that threaten to dominate the European continent. So there is historical precedent for this kind of a strategy. So, and it is a very well thought out strategy, and it is a very good offer that Zelensky is making to President Trump. And it is something which would not only sustain Ukraine's sovereignty and ability to defend itself, but what you have just described is you are describing the culmination of the approach of what Clausewitz referred to as the culminating point. The culminating point in battle where the attackers has exhausted his offensive potential, and it now opens up the possibility for the defender to counterattack and take over and drive the opposing force back. So all of this is working, whether you call it the providence of God or merely the accidental providence of man. The circumstances are working out in a way which is favorable to Ukraine, and so. It is and you notice that Putin is doubling down on his nuclear intimidation forces. We're changing our doctrine. I said, okay, big deal. Doctrine is one thing, capability is quite another. And because remember that the old Soviet Union had published in its books Vojenная Strategia, military strategy, in 1962 and 63, 3 editions, and it described what to the West looked like a nuclear warfighting, war survival doctrine on the part of the Soviet Union. And people were alarmed at this, and they said, well, do they really what they did not realize at the time, that was a statement of objective capability. Basically, this is the capability we hope to have eventually. It was implied. It did not imply that, yes, we have this capability right now, although the Soviet leadership hoped that this would create the impression in the minds of the West that, yes, we are prepared to fight, survive, and win a nuclear war with the United States. All this is very much in accordance with previous Russian capabilities. And if you go all the way back to Nikita Khrushchev, when the Soviet Union first acquired an intercontinental ballistic missile capability, he engaged in what we called strategic bluffing eventually. He was implying that the Soviet Union was producing ICBMs like sausages, and he would produce more unless we were more accommodating. Of course,
they had maybe 5 to 6 sausages, no
6.
more than that.
By 1960, we discovered, thanks to our U-2 overflights, they had 6. And these were all above ground, and we could have taken them out with our bomber force. And so there is a lot of bluffing still going on in Putin's arsenal. He keeps threatening escalation, hoping that, of course, he was hoping that Biden's fear of escalation would enable him to control the situation. But now that President Trump has been elected with a Republican Senate and Republican House behind him, with a majority of the popular vote having voted for him to reinforce his Electoral College victory, President Trump has the whip hand. He has the strategic initiative in a scale which not many people appreciate. And the fact that President Trump has declared, and this is a very key point, President Trump has declared and said that he will declare a state of national emergency on day one. I anticipate it being during his inaugural address, so that basically, and he's focusing on the illegal immigration problem. The mass deportations will begin, the process will begin on day one. Now, but his declaration of a national emergency goes further than just merely dealing with illegal immigration. When the President of the United States declares a state of national emergency, it opens up a broad array of powers, which arguably makes him the single most powerful man in the world. He can, in effect, to a large extent, act like a dictator, although not to the extent that dictators in other countries can. But it still gives him an incredible array of resources and abilities to act, which most other people in the world do not have. So this all by itself will create a great deal of uncertainty in the minds of our opponents, which is, after all, when you think about it, the essence of deterrence. Persuading your opponent that going to war or acting against your interest is just not worth the price.
Agreed. Jonathan, something else happened in the last few days. The Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of West Germany, or Germany today, he made a phone call to Mr. Putin. I don't know, maybe he had nothing better to do during the day, and maybe...
I'll call up. Hey, Vlad, how's it going?
He already had his sausages and sauerkraut and everything else, so he decided, why not to call my friend Mr. Putin? How is he doing? I haven't talked to him for 2 years.
War going well?
Well, he did call. They talked for an hour. And the result was that he said that, well, Mr. Putin wouldn't change his position, after which Macron said that there is no point for him to call Mr. Putin because we already know the result. However, I would like to mention something interesting. Obviously, Putin, by his action, he is 100% a terrorist. And his hostages are all, without exception, all population of Ukraine. He's conducting absolutely merciless genocide of Ukrainian nation. And how dare Scholz to call terrorist when it's in the rules of any civilized nation is never discuss anything with terrorists, because you just encourage him, because you already made it obvious that you're interested to talk to him, so you need something from him. That's why you made a call. So what's reply, Mr. Putin? 120 missiles killing numerous Ukrainians, destroying all the infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and others. So I think that Scholz, once he will lose his election in the next couple of months, he should be sued by tribunal for his voluntary call to Mr. Putin, which resulted in so many Ukrainian deaths. So, in my opinion, there is no. I even don't think now that after what's happening, Trump will be so eager to dial Mr. Putin and Mr. Putin say, "Hello, Donald. How can I help you? Does Donald need it?"
He can say he can basically say, "I don't need your help. You're going to need mine."
And soon.
And very good, very soon. Yeah,
Adam,
it's going to really change once that casualty rate hits the 1 million mark for the Russians.
Oh yeah, Adam, I was thinking about something from our previous discussion. Do you think that in something in this war has not been talked about a legitimate Russian concern that were not dealt with properly, and therefore there is a war which million people already lost their lives? What do you think about this?
Well, I'm not an expert on this subject, so take what I say in that context. I think the situation is more complicated than many people represent, and I think Russia did have concerns regarding its national security, particularly with the expansion of NATO and the threat of that there be pro-democracy countries on its border. Now, this is coming from someone who's not an expert on the subject, but I suspect that was a concern. Much like Cuba was a concern to the United States, although it's a pretty bad analogy. But I do think they had some legitimate concerns. I'm not saying it justifies their actions. It certainly doesn't. And the loss of life is tragic. But at the end of the day, there is no end game for Putin that will be acceptable to him, because it's simply not possible for him to accomplish his objectives. So there will be a stalemate, and there will be an end to this war. And I think it will happen under Trump very quickly.
Well,
wanted to add to Adam that Russia was not concerned about expanding NATO. It was their official position that their aggression was provoked by expanding NATO to the east. Actually, they had their own plans on those countries from the western part of Russia. Their goal was to restore the area of influence of Soviet Union and gather back all those territories, as Putin is considering that it was the greatest geopolitical tragedy, the end of the Soviet Union, and he's dreaming of restoring the great Russian Empire. So that was the only his concern, that the expanding of NATO goes against their own plans to grab those territories. And as a result, they've got Finland joining the NATO, and Finland is much more closer to borders of Russia than Ukraine. From territory of Finland, now you can hit the St. Petersburg with HIMARS, actually, if you want. And now Finland is establishing American bases and is a member of NATO. And Sweden, which was a neutral country for centuries, as the result of their Russian aggression towards Ukraine, joined NATO. So it's they've got the opposite result. But as I've said, Russia is bluffing, and all their official claims, actually, they're just hiding their real plans. When they say the white, they mean black. When they say black, they mean white.
Yeah, Adam,
Well-
just to expand on Ivan's point, that it helps if you remember that the Russian word for security, their concept of security is bezopasnost, which translated means without danger. It is a very absolute concept of security that goes beyond our normal concept of security in the West. In order for Russia, the implication of that concept is, in order for Russia to feel secure, bezopasnost, its neighbors must be, by definition, feel insecure, subordinate, or even absorbed into a greater Russian empire. So because the Russians have repeatedly stated their desire to expand their influence and in Putin's desire to recreate the old Russian Empire, this is in direct conflict, and it is irreconcilable between the Ukrainian desire for sovereignty.
Okay.
They are irreconcilable goals.
So, Ivan, I appreciate your explanation because, like I said, I'm not an expert on this issue. I can only go on what I've seen scholars from across the political spectrum in the U.S. say. So I trust your word more than I do them. So thank you for that. My question then, based on what you said, Jonathan, is what is Russia doing that is any different from what any nation throughout history does, including the United States? Why are we saying that what they're doing is so much more nefarious than, for example, what the United States has done in the last 40, 50 years?
What we have done in the last 40 to 50 years is, when in wars that we have engaged in, the ostensible goal that was declared by our foreign policy was to promote the establishment of democracy, which is something of a mistake, because we ourselves in the United States, we ourselves are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic, which is fundamentally different in nature from every other government in the world. We did not ever try to impose a constitutional republic form of government on nations in which we sent our military forces. And unlike Russia, we have not tried to establish an empire per se. And what we have here is, again, with Russia and Ukraine, are two politically irreconcilable objectives that cannot be resolved either by war, in which the victor triumphs one way or the other, or an imposed peace or an armistice, which halts the conflict and creates a situation very similar to that which currently exists between North and South Korea, an armistice, a no war, no peace.
Okay, so when we invaded Iraq the second time, hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million lives were lost. Iraqi lives, women, children. When we invaded Vietnam, hundreds of thousands of lives. We, of course, invaded Cuba. As we know, that didn't go well. My point is, why does the U.S. think it has a moral high ground over Russia when it is engaged in conduct that can be characterized as equally nefarious?
That would be, I would say, addressing those piecemeal. The failed invasion of Cuba, that was a miscalculation on the part of CIA and the political leadership, in which and that was, by the way, the prelude to the Cuban Missile Crisis, in which Khrushchev tried to basically achieve strategic equality with the United States by forward-basing nuclear missiles. Okay, right. Miscalculation on both sides in that instance. In the case of Iraq and Afghanistan, I will tell you, that was a very unfortunate strategic error on the part of the United States, because I contend that was an overreaction to the 9/11 attacks. It was an overreaction. And just prior to that, the United States, believe it or not, between Clinton and Newt Gingrich, they had established with their contract of an error, they had set up a series where the United States was having budget surpluses projected for the next several years. And there was serious talk about being able to reduce the national debt. Great. Which means it's theoretically possible again now, but it's going to be a lot harder. And now, by overreacting and going into both Iraq and into Afghanistan, we overreacted and wound up expending trillions of dollars and many American lives to no good end.
Totally agree with you.
Total Afghanistan was an abject failure, which is why, by the way, President Trump wants to fire a lot of generals once he gets in there. and just say, okay, you have failed your country, you're out of here. We're going to go with a new generation of military leadership. He has the right to do that. Just as much as right as Truman had the right to fire MacArthur when he was trying to extend the war in the Korean War with China. And so when MacArthur started acting insubordinate, Truman fired MacArthur, and he was justified in doing it. Just in the same thing now, we have two wars, we have two military involvements, Iraq and Afghanistan, which when you look at it in retrospect, was a very costly overreaction on the part of the United States, which we really did not have any moral justification to, shall we say, impose democracy, which again, we're being very disingenuous. We should be saying we want to establish constitutional republics if we were really looking at things in their true historical context. But establishing a constitutional republic in another country is really a bridge too far in many cases. The United
That's a
States.
great explanation. Thank you. I agree with you.
I would like to mention something interesting. When people are discussing the virtue of communism, and sometimes they are quoting Karl Marx, I don't think that they ever read Karl Marx. I think they read about Karl Marx and about his teachings. Because if they would read it carefully, and that applies, why I'm talking about it, because of the attempts to have some kind of a democracy in countries like Iraq or Afghanistan. So what Marx was talking about, his ideas of communism, it applies only to countries of Western civilization, only. It does not apply to all countries around the world. And then the last thing, it applies to Russia, which actually...
He regarded it as the worst possible candidate for trying to establish communism. And where did it occur? There. Yeah.
I just wanted to come back to Adam's question, because it's really great, and it's one of the narratives of Russian propaganda which they are using. Yeah, what the difference? We are doing all the same things as the United States did, and why United States are allowed to invade some countries and change the government there, and why we are not allowed. So the great difference actually is in the ways which it's being done. United States didn't annex those countries, didn't annex Afghanistan, didn't annex Vietnam and other territories where they had military operations. And Russia, they've annexed the Ukrainian territories, and they've put them into their constitution. From the side of Russian constitution, there is no difference between Kherson Oblast, Donetsk, Lugansk Oblast, or the original territories of Russia. They're all the same in Russian constitution. That's why those restrictions to use American weapons on strikes on occupied territories or on original Russian territories, they're looking funny, because from the point of Russian constitution, there is no difference between those territories. And another...
very quick observation. So if now Kherson, Zaporozhye, Kursk Oblast will start fight against Russia, so it will be a civil war between Russian different states, right?
Yeah, they really broken the world order and old security principles, actually. And another point and great difference between the United States and Russia in this point is the way how this had been done. I'm not sure if United States committed such a number of atrocities in Iraq, Afghanistan. I didn't heard that they've kidnapped Iraq children or Afghanistan children, bring them to United States territory and made Americans from them. That's what Russia is doing with occupied territories. They kidnap children from there, they bring them to Russia, they militarize them, and they're making Russians from those children. I didn't heard about torturing and killing civilians already on occupied territories, and you've seen what Russians done in Bucha, in Kherson, in Kharkiv region, when those territories were deoccupied. Dozens of killed and tortured civilians, and even United States, the completely useless organization, they've acknowledged that Russia committed numerous acts of genocide on occupied territories. And I think that's the great difference. First is a goal, why this is being made, and second is the ways. And it's not actually okay, in my opinion, to compare those things, because this is the way how Russian propaganda is spreading those narratives, and they're trying to show that they're doing just the same things like United States did in Iraq, Afghanistan, nothing more. And when you ask such questions, it's unfortunately it shows that Russian propaganda is working pretty good, because you're asking.
Well, I would like to. I would like to think that I can discern, to some degree, propaganda from legitimate reporting. But in the wake of September 11th, the United States committed some of the worst acts of torture by the CIA against terror suspects. They committed atrocities in Vietnam that are unspeakable. They did the same thing in Iraq. They destabilized the Middle East terribly and killed over 1 million people. I'm not saying that Russia, what Russia's doing in any way can be justified. I'm saying that the U.S. does not have a moral high ground.
It doesn't make Ukrainian situation any easier because of that. And now when
what do you say to that? How do you respond to that, Sasha? I mean, do you realize the atrocities we have committed, the torture we have inflicted?
No. What I heard from you is that the action of United States questionable or even unspeakable, if you will. Although in the view of 9/11, I couldn't.
Well, we tried to bring democracy to Iraq. We killed
very
successfully.
Okay, so
very unsuccessfully by a terrible president, in my view.
Okay, so the president and his people, they didn't study Karl Marx, and they believe that this democracy or socialism can be implanted wherever you wish. Okay, it doesn't work out. However, how does it apply to genocide of Ukrainian people? So your position is because America could do this, and that, so then Russia can do. Russia doesn't have the same weight. Russia doesn't have the same might, military including, because imagine that let's see, Mexico did some unfriendly actions against the United States. The United States asked, could you please correct it in the next half an hour? Because otherwise we will have to deal with that. And Mexico said, we don't care. Do whatever you want. So in an hour and a half, Mexico would be part of the United States. That's the story. So in order to have the same cloud as the United States, Russia has to demonstrate that it has capacity to do so. So for 1,000 days, they were unable to demonstrate that. So therefore, any comparison between what U.S. could have done and what Russia could have done, if U.S. is over here and Russia is over there in the basement, then how you can compare these two systems? I'll tell you what's happening, Adam. Hold on.
It's a moral comparison.
Okay. No, I don't care about that much at all. I seem to be studying.
When you say moral comparison, by the way, what system of morality are you trying to impose? Relative morality is meaningless. And absolute morality? Are you trying to impose the principles of Christianity upon the whole world? Good luck with that, because in the Bible itself, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world." And
by the way,
go ahead.
Jonathan, very interesting. Just a sec, Adam. The nuclear chantage of Mr. Putin in fact works, and you know what? Surprisingly, it works the best against the mightiest, wealthiest people in the world, like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, it works magnificently well. So one wants to escape to Mars. Okay, there will be nuclear war on Earth. So I will send so many people. I will send spaceships to Mars. There will be new civilization, and nobody will able to bring nuclear weapons on the Mars, number one.
Yeah.
And Peter Thiel, he is talking about some artificial intelligence and some other stuff that may counter the proliferation of.
Well, I think that the situation is. I just think the situation is more complicated and nuanced than.
Everything is complicated. Everything is complicated. But what I heard very interesting.
What Russia is doing is terrible. I get that. But what the United States has done, maybe I'm using Kant's categorical imperative. What the United States has done has been atrocious across history. That doesn't justify Russia's actions, but it certainly doesn't allow us to call them the evil empire while we're inflicting torture and atrocity on other nations, namely Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. I mean, need I go on?
Adam, but look, what you're talking about, you're trying to compare. You're trying to compare Lexus to some.
I get what you're saying. I do.
Chevrolet. There is no comparison. But I want to say something interesting about what Jonathan, you just touched about religions. That's why I want to digress a little bit. Neither Musk nor Peter Thiel nor anybody else should be worried about nuclear scenario. Why? Because there were already so many instances where it indeed could happen, starting with Cuban crisis and many other situations. And people are forgetting about one thing. Forget about artificial intelligence and all others. People are forgetting that there is a God. And God will not allow that to happen. It's just as simple as that. Because people still have to believe in that there is some kind of a superior entity, which most likely is God, that takes care of all this.
Speaking, Adam, from my perspective, briefly as a Christian, is that God, according to the belief of Christians, that nothing in this universe, or in this world for that matter, occurs unless God causes it to happen or allows it to happen. God created all human beings with the power to choose. He gave all of us free will, the ability to choose between doing good and doing evil. As C.S. Lewis pointed out, if a person is free to be good, he is also free to be evil. Free will is what makes evil possible. And all of the wickedness, all of the terrible things that have happened throughout human history, all of human history, is the long and terrible story of men and women choosing to do evil rather than good. That is free will. That is unfortunate. That is the outcome with which we all have to deal. So now what we have here is what Martin Luther called, we all Christians live in two kingdoms: the kingdom of God, which is the kingdom of heaven, which will exist after this life, and the kingdom of that's the kingdom of the right hand. The kingdom of the left hand is the kingdom of this world, in which we all exist, Christians and non-believers alike, in a system of governments designed to promote, which is the objective to promote stability in its best case, to try to limit the power of evildoers to do evil. So, and I will concede, the United States has its share of wrongdoings. It's the government, and starting with, we can have a whole show just devoted to that. But what President Trump is trying to do, to his credit, the implication of to make America great again by promoting America first, is its ultimate manifestation will be a U.S. government military with a first-class military, not designed to intervene in the affairs of others, but to act as the geopolitical balancer, to try to achieve global stability. That is the best that you can hope for in our current existence, until over a course of, it was done actually in Europe in the 19th century, where Europe was without war for an entire century, which was very good until, of course, World War I broke out. And then you have, politics, you must remember, is the art of the possible. And so what we can achieve right now is the principal goal right now is to stop to stop aggression, stop war, discourage further to promote strategic stability throughout the world, not necessarily democracy, but to promote stability, and so that we can devote ourselves to solving other problems, which, believe you me, there are huge ones, as you well know, in the United States as well as elsewhere.
I think you would be an excellent professor, and your explanations are very good.
I have, my dear friend, I have been a college professor. I earned my PhD at the age of 24 before I came into the Army as a first lieutenant.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I came as a 24-year-old first lieutenant with a PhD in international affairs, Soviet area studies.
Well, you're very smart and excellent analysis.
They told me when I came into the Army that not only was I the only lieutenant in the Army with a PhD at that time, but the only lieutenant in the entire Armed Forces of the United States with a PhD. And the big advantage of that was nobody ever called me a dumb lieutenant.
See, Sasha, I have an eye for elite talent.
Yeah.
Ivan, what do you think? Thank you for that explanation.
Well, my friend, I'm glad you enjoyed it, because I will be passing along in future programs here, as soon as this Friday, the implications of other policies of President Trump and their impact upon Ukraine, because after all, this is the Ukraine show, not the United States show. So we must remember for whom we are all doing this. We are doing this for Ivan's country.
That's
not
right.
ours.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And actually, a really great discussion, but I've got another video. It's a trailer of a movie you probably heard about. It's 20 Days in Mariupol, which I've got Oscar this year. And actually, this is a mind-blowing movie. It's documentary and available on Netflix. So I really advise you to watch it. And even Russians who consider it that Russia is doing something good in Ukraine and they have all rights and to claim back their territories, they've changed their mind and actually moved to Ukrainians' side after watching this movie. A recent Russian traitor who destroyed a naval ship, military ship in St. Petersburg, he decided to betray Russia after watching this movie, because after watching it, he understood who is right and who is on the side of good in this war and who is on the side of evil in this war. So I ask Mark now to play this video for us.
Thank you.
Someone once told me, wars don't start with explosions. They start with silence.
Лично видим визуально. Танки зашли с надписью Z.
Город Мариуполь блокирован со всех сторон.
Russians have entered the city. The war has begun, and we have to tell its story.
Хорошо, что тут есть пресса. Снимайте.
This is painful to watch, but it must be painful to watch.
Вони нанесли бомбовий удар. Вон там! Хирургический корпус, вот там вот!
А, вы госпитале, да?
Мамочка!
Не знаешь, куда бежать.
Чего расстраиваешься?
Не хочу, чтобы я умирала.
Репортажи ваши разошлись. Конечно, огромное дело.
Они столько пережили с мамами.
If the world saw everything that happened in Mariupol, it would give at least some meaning to this horror. My brain will desperately want to forget all this, but the camera will not let it happen.
Fantastic, yes. I've seen some of it. I didn't see the full movie, but I've seen some of it. And it's a brilliant movie. Yeah, we'll watch it, of course.
Adam, I've got you. It's my personal ask for you to watch this movie, and we will discuss it on the next show.
Agreed.
Okay.
I would like to mention before we finish today's program, for which I thank you all a lot. I'd like to mention, Jonathan, maybe you will comment on this. Unfortunately, until very recently, the history, geography, and all science in the West about this part of the world was Russia, Soviet Union, Tsarist Russia, Communist Russia, Putin's Russia, and Ukraine. It was assumed as just a part of it. So why talk about part of it when we can discuss the whole thing to really understand what it's all about? And thanks to Professor Schneider, who has completed history of Ukraine, and it's now started to be taught in U.S. colleges and universities. There are about 20 lectures. I've heard all of them. When it started with the ancient Greeks, when they had their territories in Crimea and slowly developed, and Turkish ownership. By the way, it's very interesting analysis that Turkey is now playing both sides against each other because eventually they want to wrestle Crimea to themselves. So, and they figured out that it's much easier to do it if Russia will own Crimea, because in Ukraine it's an integral part of the Ukrainian territory. With Russia, okay, they just grabbed it from Ukraine, so it would be just as easily to grab it away from Russia. But it's beside the point. So what I'm saying is that Professor Timothy Schneider is doing a great job. I've heard all his 20 lectures and other his performances on this theme, and hopefully it will catch on, and the American establishment will be able to distinguish between Russia, its history, its place in the world, and Ukraine as a separate entity with its history, its place in the world.
Well,
Thank you, Sasha, for this. Just wanted to add that unfortunately you've heard the expression that history is written by the winners. And it was Ukraine's bad luck that Russia in those continuous war between on Ukraine, they were always winners. So they had all possibilities to write their own history. I've actually studied the history of the Soviet Union in school, including the history of Ukraine, because when I joined school, it was still a Soviet Union, and it was not the real history which actually we know now, thanks to Timothy Schneider as well. And the bad point is that American establishment, they learned the history of Eastern Europe, of Ukraine by Russian books. Unfortunately, they didn't have their own possibility to discover the truth behind this history, because all those history was written by Russian books, by Russian historians.
And that's very unfortunate because of the pact between Stalin and Hitler. That alone led to Second World War, and that millions, tens of millions of people perished. If it wouldn't be for that pact, Hitler would never even think about attacking Poland or Western powers and so on. So in the Nuremberg process, Russians had to be accused party, not the party that was participating in the parade of the winners, because they were very, very guilty, and they had their hands in the blood, really.
Well, I had the good fortune. I had the good fortune.
I've heard a real interesting theory that Nazi Germany, when in the end of this war, and I really like to hear Jonathan's opinion on this point. They've gathered several tank divisions, and they've used. I think that they've used them towards the American, towards the allies which are going from the West, but not from the Soviet Union. And it was better for Germany to use them towards Soviet Union to stop the advancing of Soviet armies, and in the end to surrender to Americans and British troops rather than be occupied by Soviet Unions.
That is an excellent point and an excellent potential for alternate history, because when the Allies were advancing in the West and the Soviets were advancing in the East, the Germans really had two basic strategic alternatives. They could either do as they did in the Ardennes, try to split the Allies in the West and force a separate peace there. That was a real long shot. The more realistic alternative was to take those two panzer armies, full panzer armies with that would have been used in the Bulge offensive, and deploy them in the East against the Soviet forces, basically with the objective of punching a hole through to the Kulan Peninsula, where the German 19th Army had been bypassed and trapped. The objective would be to open that corridor, enable the 19th Army to withdraw and pull out, and reestablish a firmer defense in the East, which would have been able to hold out the Soviet Army long enough to allow the West to come in and occupy the whole of Germany. Because if you look at it, if the German leadership had been more sensible, obviously with Hitler not in charge, you would have had a situation, which is better? Do we surrender to the Americans, the British, and the French, or do we surrender to the Russians? Well, given their experience to that point, any common sense being exercised by the Germans would say it is better for us to surrender to the Western Allies rather than to Russia. So therefore, we want to take our strategic reserves, commit them against the Russians, consolidate defense, and hold them out long enough. So we say we would rather surrender to you than to the Russians. That would have been a more sensible thing. And at that point, no one was exercising any common sense.
Absolutely. In this case, Russian soldiers wouldn't be able to rape more than 2 million German women, by the way. It's also important to remember. There's something else I wanted to discuss, but going beyond the scope of today's conversation, we'll do it next time on Friday. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating in today's program.
Great seeing you.
Thank you, and great to see you all, and we'll see you on Friday. And there will be much more news, I think, to discuss by Friday. Thank you very much again. Have a great day. See you all soon.
Thank you.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Bye-bye.